Dawn, October 25, 1944. The waters east of Samar, in the Philippines. A radar operator aboard a small American escort carrier, a ship built on a converted merchant hull, 7,800 tons, no armor to speak of, capable of maybe 20 knots flat out, watches a cluster of pips crawl onto his screen from the north. Anti-aircraft gunners on the flight deck lift their binoculars toward the horizon and see something that should not be possible at that range. At that hour, pagoda masts, battleship masts, then more of them, then a shape so large that for a moment the lookouts assume they are looking at land moving. They are looking at the main battle line of the Imperial Japanese Navy. 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 11 destroyers, including Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. A ship whose 18-inch guns could put a shell farther and heavier than anything the US Navy had ever mounted on a warship. And standing between that battle line and the American landing beaches at Leyte is Task Unit 77.4. 6 of those thin-skinned escort carriers, 3 destroyers, 4 smaller destroyer escorts under Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague. Sailors called ships like his Kaiser's coffins. Their biggest guns were 5 inches across. Yamato's were 18. Sprague gets on the radio and asks for help from anyone who can give it. There isn't much anyone can give. His own carrier's planes were loaded that morning for ground support over Leyte, depth charges, fragmentation bombs, machine guns, nothing built to punch through a battleship's belt armor. Pilots go up anyway. When their bombs and torpedoes run out, they keep making runs on the Japanese cruisers with empty racks. One man flying 20 strafing passes, 10 of them without a round left to fire, hoping the ships below won't know the difference until it's too late to matter. It is, for a few hours, the entire American response to the largest warship ever built, bearing down on an invasion beachhead. There is no American battleship anywhere near this fight. That fact matters more than it should, because at that exact hour, the United States Navy possesses the 4 most powerful, fastest battleships it has ever built, 36 16-inch guns between them, more armor and more speed than anything Japan ever put to sea, and every one of them is a full battle's distance away, steaming hard in the opposite direction, chasing something that isn't there. Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, Wisconsin, built, on paper, to do exactly what is about to happen off Samar without them. And when the war ends less than a year later, not one of the 4 will have fired its main guns at an enemy battleship. Not that morning. Not ever. In the entire war. To understand how the fastest battleships in history ended up on the wrong side of the ocean at the one moment they were built for, you have to go back 6 years. To a design argument that had nothing to do with Samar and everything to do with a single number: knots. In the spring of 1938, the Navy's General Board was choosing between 2 competing blueprints for its next class of battleship. One option was a slow, heavily armored ship, an enlarged version of the South Dakota class, carrying more guns and thicker plate, capable of about 27 knots. The same speed as every American battleship already in commission. The other option sacrificed some of that armor for propulsion machinery big enough to push a 58,000-ton hull through the water at over 33 knots. That was 6 knots faster than Japan's Congo class, older battle cruisers rebuilt for 30 knots that were, at the time, the fastest capital ships afloat in the Pacific, and the only Japanese ships that could realistically threaten an American task force from behind. Fast enough to run one down. Fast enough, just as importantly, to keep pace with the Navy's new fast carriers instead of trailing behind them the way every earlier battleship did, arriving at a battle a day late. The board picked speed. That decision is the entire reason the Iowa class exists. It was not built to slug it out at close range with an equal, the way battleships had fought for a century. It was built to catch things, to run down a fleeing enemy formation, to escort carriers into waters no earlier battleship could reach in time, to be, in the plainest sense, a hunter. Earlier American battleships made 27 knots. The Iowas made 33. On paper, they were the answer to a very specific question the Navy had been asking since the mid-1930s: what do we send after a fast Japanese battleship, when nothing else in the fleet can catch one? They were built big enough to answer it too, fully loaded. An Iowa-class ship ran close to 58,000 tons, carried 9 16-inch guns in 3 triple turrets, and could put a shell weighing as much as a small car onto a target more than 20 miles away. Only one ship afloat anywhere in the world outweighed and outgunned her, Yamato, at over 70,000 tons, carrying 9 18-inch guns that threw a heavier shell farther than an Iowa's could reach. The Navy that built the Iowa class knew about Yamato only in outline, from scraps of intelligence, and still built its own battleships around the assumption that speed, not size, would decide who got to choose when and where the fight happened. It was a good assumption. It also meant the class would spend most of its existence as an insurance policy nobody expected to cash in, right up until the one morning it should have been. There was a man in the Navy at that time who could have answered that question better than almost anyone, though in 1938 he had nothing to do with battleship design at all. His name was Willis Augustus Lee, and everyone who knew him called him Ching. He'd grown up in rural Kentucky, one of 8 children on a farm, and the thing he was good at, the thing that had nothing to do with the war that hadn't started yet, was shooting. At the 1920 Olympics in Antwerp, Lee walked away with 7 medals in rifle and pistol events, 5 of them gold. He and a teammate tied for the most medals ever won by an athlete at a single Olympic Games, a record that held for 60 years. He did not become a gunnery officer because the Navy needed one filled. He became one because hitting a target was, for him, close to an obsession. An obsession he spent the next 2 decades applying to naval guns of every size: 4-inch, 5-inch, 16-inch, anything that fired a projectile and could, in his judgment, be made to fire it more accurately than the man next to him thought possible. By November of 1942, that obsession had a battleship attached to it. Off Guadalcanal, on the night of the 14th, Lee commanded the American force sent to stop a Japanese battleship, Kirishima, from reaching the island and bombarding the Marines dug in around Henderson Field. Most captains on both sides still distrusted radar for gunnery. It was new. It drifted. It had failed people before. Lee didn't. Using radar to lay his guns in total darkness, his flagship, the battleship Washington, closed to close range and put shell after shell into Kirishima until she rolled over and sank before dawn. It remains to this day the only battleship versus battleship gun duel of the entire Pacific War fought to a clean, one-sided finish. Ching Lee, the Olympic marksman, had just proven, under fire, that an American battleship with the right fire control could kill a Japanese one in the dark. He was, at that moment, the one man in the fleet who had actually done the job the Iowa class existed to do. And the Iowa class didn't exist yet. Not one had left the shipyard. 2 years later, Lee had the ships to do it again. By 1944, he commanded the fast battleship force built around the new Iowa class. Organized as Task Force 34, the hammer the Navy had spent 6 years and a design argument building. In February, off the Japanese fortress anchorage at Truk, Iowa and New Jersey got the closest they would come, in the entire war, to the fight they were designed for. Under Admiral Raymond Spruance's personal command, chasing ships fleeing the anchorage after 2 days of carrier airstrikes had wrecked it, New Jersey and Iowa opened fire with their 16-inch guns on a fleeing Japanese light cruiser and a destroyer. The cruiser, Katori, went down, hit by carrier aircraft and by Iowa's main battery. The destroyer Maikaze was finished off by the accompanying American cruisers. A third Japanese destroyer, Nowaki, got away after a near miss from New Jersey, landed close enough, at a range of more than 20 miles, to be its own kind of message. It was the only time in their entire careers that Iowa and New Jersey would fire their main guns at an enemy warship, not a battleship, a cruiser and 2 destroyers, at the edge of a lagoon, while the ships they had actually been built to kill stayed a continent away. Truk was supposed to be the proof of concept the moment the fast battleships showed what 6 years of design work had bought the Navy. In one sense it was. No earlier American battleship could have kept pace with Spruance's carriers long enough to be there at all, let alone put a fleeing cruiser on the bottom at extreme range, while a task force built around speed swept an entire fortified anchorage in 2 days. In another sense, it only sharpened the question nobody could yet answer. The Iowa class had been built to kill a fast battleship. 9 months into their combat careers, they still hadn't seen one. 8 months later, the targets stopped staying a continent away, and Lee's battleships were looking in the wrong direction when it happened. By October of 1944, the plan for what to do if a Japanese battle fleet tried to force the San Bernardino Strait north of Leyte was simple and had been agreed on in advance. Detach Task Force 34 put Lee's fast battleships across the strait and stopped them there, with the 33-knot speed and 16-inch guns that had been the entire justification for building the class in the first place. On the night of October 24th, a Japanese decoy force of carriers under Admiral Ozawa, stripped of most of their aircraft on purpose, sent north specifically to be found by American scout planes, appeared on the returns. Admiral Halsey, commanding the 3rd Fleet from the deck of New Jersey, took the bait. He turned his carriers north after Ozawa, and he took Lee's battleships with him, leaving San Bernardino Strait open behind him. Through it, undetected and completely unopposed, came the main Japanese battle force under Admiral Kurita, the cruisers, the destroyers, and Yamato. What Kurita found on the other side, at dawn, was Sprague's Taffy 3. Among the destroyers screening those 6 thin-hulled carriers was USS Johnston, commanded by Ernest Evans, a Cherokee officer from Oklahoma who had spent his career fighting the kind of quiet, grinding prejudice that came with being a Native American in a peacetime Navy that did not make that easy on anyone. When the Japanese battle line came over the horizon, Evans did not wait for orders from anyone above him. He turned Johnston directly at it, left full rudder, all engines ahead flank, and closed the range on ships that outweighed his own by a factor of 10. Firing everything he had, launching torpedoes at a formation that included Yamato herself. Sprague sent his other destroyers in behind Johnston, laying smoke to blind the Japanese gunners. Breaking formation, absorbing fire meant for the carriers running behind them at barely 20 knots. For close to 3 hours, a handful of ships built to screen convoys fought a fleet action no destroyer was ever built to fight. Destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts, a ship designed to hunt submarines and armed accordingly, closed on Japanese heavy cruisers and traded fire with them anyway, earning the nickname after the war of the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship. Until the battleship Congo's guns found her and she went down at 10:10 that morning, taking 89 of her crew with her. Gambier Bay, hit by cruiser fire and then battered directly by Yamato's own main turrets, capsized and sank. The only American aircraft carrier lost to enemy surface gunfire in the entire war. Johnston went down not long after. Evans went down with her. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the first Native American sailor to receive it, for doing, in a ship never designed for it, exactly the job that 4 battleships built specifically to do it were at that hour. A full battle's distance to the north. Kurita broke off the attack and turned his battleships around before he finished the job. He had 4 battleships, including the largest in the world, against 6 escort carriers and a handful of small ships with no armor worth the name, and he pulled back anyway, convinced by the ferocity of the American attack and the smoke and confusion of the action that he had run into a much larger force, part of Halsey's main fleet rather than the improvised, thinly protected convoy screen he had actually cornered. Taffy 3 didn't win the Battle of Samar by outfighting Kurita's fleet in any conventional sense. It won by convincing him, through sheer refusal to stop attacking, that the fight in front of him was bigger than it was. Somewhere north of the fight, aboard New Jersey, the radio room decoded a message from Admiral Nimitz's headquarters in Pearl Harbor, meant for Halsey alone but padded, as a matter of standard security practice, with nonsense phrases meant to confuse enemy code breakers. The padding wasn't stripped out before the message reached the bridge. It read, in full, "Where is Task Force 34? The world wonders." Halsey took it as a rebuke, because it was one. He turned his battleships around. They arrived off San Bernardino Strait 3 hours after Kurita had already broken off the attack on Taffy 3 and withdrawn back through it. 3 hours too late to catch the force they had spent 6 years, and 33 knots of design speed, specifically being built to catch. The Iowa class never got another chance. The war ended 10 months later. Across 4 ships and nearly 4 years of combat, they had fired their 16-inch guns at Japanese airfields, at shore installations, at kamikazes and float planes, and at 1 light cruiser and 2 destroyers off Truk. Not once, on any day, in any ocean, at a Japanese battleship. The ship that received Japan's formal surrender in Tokyo Bay the following September, on the 2nd of September 1945, was Missouri. Another of the 4. General MacArthur signed the surrender documents on a table set up on her deck. She hosted a ceremony. She never fired a shot at anything resembling what she had been designed back in 1938 to kill. Willis Lee did not live to see even that. In the final months of the war, worried about the mounting toll of kamikaze attacks on the fleet, the Navy sent him to Casco Bay, Maine, to run a research program testing new tactics and equipment against suicide planes, the same restless fire control obsession that had once been aimed at Kirishima in the dark of Guadalcanal, now aimed at a threat no turret could fully solve. On the morning of August 25, 1945, 9 days after Japan agreed to surrender, 8 days before the ceremony aboard Missouri, Lee collapsed of a heart attack in the small motor launch carrying him out across Portland Harbor to his flagship. He never reached it. There is a kind of symmetry in that, if you're willing to look for it, though it isn't the kind that flatters anyone. The Navy spent 6 years and a fortune building 4 ships fast enough to catch anything the enemy could put in the water and armed them heavily enough to end the fight the moment they arrived. Its best gunnery officer proved, in the dark of Guadalcanal, that the whole idea worked. 2 full years before the ships built to prove it at scale ever left the yard. And when the one battle of the war that actually needed them arrived, when the masts came up over the horizon at Samar and there was nothing standing between them and the beaches but 6 converted merchant hulls, a handful of destroyers, and a Cherokee lieutenant commander willing to charge a battleship in a ship built to screen convoys, the fastest battleships in the world were somewhere else, chasing a fleet that had no intention of fighting them at all. And the one man who had already proven exactly what those battleships could do was, by the war's last week, unable to reach a boat that would have carried him nowhere near a battle of any kind. The guns got their moment anyway, in the end, just not the one they were built for. Missouri's 16-inch turrets sat loaded and silent through the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay, while officers in dress whites signed papers on a folding table a few feet away. Nobody fired a shot. Nobody needed to. The war those guns had been designed to fight, The one where a fast, heavy American battleship ran down a fast, heavy Japanese one and settled the argument at close range. Had already happened once off Guadalcanal on a ship that wasn't Missouri's class at all, fought by a man who wouldn't live to see the deck where his own theory finally got its formal, bloodless, unnecessary confirmation. If you had family who served aboard Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, or Wisconsin during the war, or aboard any of the destroyer escorts, and escort carriers of Taffy 3 that morning off Samar, I'd like to hear what they told you about it, because the men on both sides of that gap, the ones who spent the war chasing a fight that never came, and the ones who got a fight they were never built for, mostly came home afterward and didn't talk about it much.